All right, welcome everyone. We're gonna be getting started here pretty quickly. My name is Maria Plessel. I'm the executive director of Minnestar. We are a nonprofit community organization that serves Minnesota's technology community. I'm gonna let my friends here introduce themselves because today we're gonna be talking about hiring junior devs 101. This is part of our series called Mini AMA. Every month we invite industry experts on a different topic, and we have this call with you all, and it's an opportunity for us to have a way to learn but also engage in real time. So hope you all have enjoyed your lunch and you're gonna learn from our friends here today. So if you all could introduce yourselves, who you are, what you do, but also how you got involved in tech. What was your first learning opportunities there? And why don't we start with Casey?
Hey y'all, my name is Casey Helbling. I'm the founder and CEO of Software for Good. So I got started in tech. Gosh, it was actually a pretty traditional route. I came to Minnesota from North Dakota, went to the University of Minnesota, started in an internship at a company called DataCard here, I think in Minnetonka. Did that for a few years, finished my degree at the U, and then started a full-time gig at a place called Imaginet, which was founded by the founders of Magnet 360 and a whole bunch of other awesome things, Scott Littman and Dan Mallon.
Oh, that was it. Okay. I'm Chelsey McKinney. I'm a junior dev who works for the city of St. Paul. I started programming, doing like tutorials, online classes, and then I went to the University of Minnesota's full stack coding bootcamp and graduated almost a year ago. Yeah.
Nice. All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Matt Decuir. I'm the founder of, I'm a self-taught software engineer. I'll start with that. I'm the founder of both Minneapolis Junior Devs, which is a community of aspiring and less experienced software engineers in the Twin Cities. We started it about 3 years ago, and got a great team of organizers who continue to run it on a daily basis. And I'm kind of stepping back as and more involved from a strategic perspective, but since running our community for the last 2.5 years, very actively involved in our community. I'm also the founder of the Invisible Network, which is an anonymous job search tool to make the job search a better experience. And through that, and making I launched this as a side project about a year ago. It just hit our 1-year anniversary. Which is very exciting. I'm full-time on it, and we took it from side projects to revenue-generating business in a matter of a year, which is very exciting. And through working on the Invisible Network, I've got an additional unique perspective on hiring and job searches in the Twin Cities, mostly in tech. The question about how you got into tech, I started my career as a data analyst. I studied finance in school. I stumbled into being a data analyst, and I got really good at spreadsheets. And I hit the limitations of Microsoft Excel enough times that I was like, there's got to be a better way to do this. And so it took me a couple false starts, but I eventually tried my hand at teaching myself to code. And the third time it actually stuck. And I've been a software engineer for the last 3.5 years. Sorry, that was way long.
No, that's awesome. No, thank you.
You said limitations of spreadsheets. What is that?
Well, I'll show you some spreadsheets. I've seen his spreadsheets.
Wow. You are a spreadsheet guru. I do like that. All right, well, a little bit of housekeeping. So if you've not joined us before, you'll see that if you scroll to the bottom, there is a chat icon. We want to hear your questions. So we have a wide variety of experiences here. We have, in a nutshell, we have Casey, who owns his own small business and has a really cool internship program that he'll talk about that engages new technologists. We have Chelsey, who is in her first gig with the city of St. Paul and has the perspective of a junior developer. You have been, all of the things that Matt does, but I think from the perspective of running Minneapolis Junior Devs, and I know we're going to want to talk more about that too, having grown in your own career and also now being a founder, I think that we just have a wealth of different experiences here. as well as from, boot camp experiences, self-taught, et cetera, et cetera. So please take advantage of the brain power that's in the room here. And if you have questions, just throw them in the chat and then we'll get to them as we go. We do have some questions that have been pre-populated, so we'll start with those. But yeah, feel free to engage. This is your time too. So, so one of the things that maybe just to kind of like level set, I do hear from a bunch of folks in the community around this whole idea of like how do you even define what a junior dev is? Like years of experience, whatnot. And I feel like I'd love to hear your perspective because you interface with so many different companies through your job, but also, Casey, from how do you define that for your program, for your internship program, et cetera? So like whoever wants to jump in there.
I can start. Okay, so from a community perspective with Minneapolis Junior Devs, we really say if you identify as a junior dev, like our community is for you. Whether that means you want to get into programming, whether you're just thinking about it, or whether you're actually doing it, or you're somewhere on that spectrum of in the process of learning and getting into software, like you're all welcome. And that's part of like our organization is we want to make a welcoming place where everybody is, like anybody can be here, whether it's just a gleam in your eye or you're doing it full time. And what's tricky is that definition, like there's a mismatch in that definition in how employers define junior dev. And it seems kind of like, depending on who you talk to, every employer has a different definition. And so through the Invisible Network, I mean, I think about experience levels kind of like this, where there's like less than a year of experience, which I would consider entry level, 1 to 3 years of experience, which I would consider junior, like 3 to 5, 3 to 6 years is sort of more mid-level, and then above 5 is like senior. And as far as like hiring and dealing with like working with employers and job opportunities, like that's how I define it from an employer perspective. And so, but I mean, we're talking about junior devs here. And if you just came out of prime and you just graduated and you're looking for your first job, I would think of you as a junior dev too, but you're on the entry level side, not on the I have some experience side. So.
Yeah, and from on the hiring perspective and on sort of the career path or trajectory perspective, I think of it sort of similarly in that, well, actually I think of it a little bit different in that I want to see the developers showing the ability to solve problems, ask smart questions, and sort of move things forward. And so once you get comfortable with being able to solve things in whatever tech stack or thing that you're doing, and be able to accomplish and move things forward, that's sort of, the upper end of that junior spectrum. And then once you get into the next mid to senior level, I think of those folks are not only solving problems and doing all the things, but also mentoring. And so one of the distinguishing characteristics is how much can you answer questions for your teammates, and how much can you be a mentor for them. So that's one of the distinguishing characteristics from junior to mid or senior for me.
Like, it's based on the capability, kind of.
Yeah, both being able to solve problems, get things done, and then also help your team move fast and be successful and be smart about what they're doing and learning.
I guess for me, when I was like job hunting, I very rarely saw the title junior in the job postings. It was always entry level or just full stack developer or like JavaScript developer. So I knew I kind of fit in one of those because I was like, obviously I'm looking for a job, but the job postings were also very different. Entry level was like 3 to 5 years, and then full stack developer was like 1 to 2. So I was just like, you fit in where you can get in.
It's so hard because it's not standardized.
Yeah,
it'd be so great if it was. It's like if everybody agreed, all right, we're going to call junior devs associates, and then from there, like it would be great if that happened. That doesn't happen. No.
Well, the software engineering field is different than other engineering fields that have professional engineering certificates where you need to test into to be sort of an apprentice or a senior, if you will. Yeah. Like all these different levels, right? And so we're different from that perspective, for better or for worse. I'm not really sure. But yeah, it would be actually interesting to know what that looked like. What would those gates legitimately look like if we had certifications in our field? I think, frankly, one of the reasons we can't do that is things move and change so quickly that we just, what do you test on? Do you test on Do you test on a mean MERN stack or something now? Do you test on Rails? Do you test on Python? Do you test on .NET? Who knows? Like, everything's changing so quickly, and so unless you have to test for every one of those and pick, or I don't know, whatever. Yeah, diverge.
No, I mean, that's really helpful. I think that, when we talk about the perspective of folks who are just entering the industry, so whether they're graduating from Prime or they're coming out of a 4-year degree, learning how to navigate that, though, that's got to be really challenging. Like, well, you just went through this, though. Like, so the application, interviewing, all of that perspective. How was that? And then, I guess more broadly, if we could talk about just the experience of folks that are entering the community right now.
I used to be a Debbie Downer.
Do it.
But it was rough. It was so rough. It's hard out here. But again, I got lucky because I knew people in the community. So I reached out to my personal network first, and then they referred me. And then Matt had just started the Invisible Network, so that helped out immensely. So I was like, sweet. But for the most part, it was like me in a room with like the team of developers for like 2.5 to 3 hours.
Like in the interviews?
Yeah, like in the interviews, like them shooting off questions one by one and like whiteboarding, and I hated it. No. I'm still here, but it's still like, I don't know.
Did you find differences in interview processes, like with all the different people that you're meeting with, or not?
Yes. Okay. Yeah, it was so different. Whiteboarding, I would either have like whiteboarding and then they'd be like, solve this problem. And that was 2.5 hours of that. Or it was 2.5 hours of just asking questions. Then you had like, I guess, technical questions, or like problem solving. This train leaves at whatever. I don't know. Obviously,
hypothetical math questions.
Yeah, hypothetical math questions. And the best interview I had was actually with a company where I was pair programming with a team, and I was able to see how they were working as a team, and they helped me out. And it was like 2 of them, and they told jokes. Like, I messed up on naming a variable, and they're like, "It's fine. We just need a net marsupial." Nice. And I was like, that's interesting. So, I mean, it was just, I was like, this is what it feels like to be on a team, which is what I need. Like, I can't, if I'm just sitting here answering questions, it's like a test, and I don't get a sense of who I'm working with or who I'm going to be working with, what the company's like, so.
It brings us to kind of a question that we were talking about prior to this that I know I get sometimes, I bet you get a ton of just, what are best practices when it comes to interviewing? Like, what are some horror stories of like, please don't do this? And what are some that are like, your experience of being able to pair program in the interview process and getting a sense of not only was that probably good from a technical aspect, but also it was probably really good for you to get a sense of the culture and just the type of people that are working there. Do's and don'ts of the interview process. Don't be shy.
I have so many feelings.
Do it.
Like,
so many feelings. You made to talk about it, actually.
Yeah.
I'm gonna talk to this. So, and like, I have feelings because I've been involved at my last job in establishing a consistent process by which the company exclusively hired junior devs. So we were able to establish a process, and the goal was to reduce bias as much as we possibly can in how we assess people, and assess them fairly and in a humane way, where going through our interview process, while there are quite a few steps and it's intensive, like when you come in, but there's no way to avoid it being intensive, where we evaluated everybody in a consistent and fair way. And at the end, we could take our emotion out of it and say, all right, by the numbers, here's who we think have the most potential. Having gone through that experience, having done a bunch of interviews, having gone through interviews myself as a junior dev, like, I would agree with Chelsey that pair programming, in my experience, is the best possible way to do a technical assessment for a junior dev, because you're assessing for more than just technical knowledge. You're assessing for more than just hard skills. You like the thing that you want to get out of it is, how do they approach solving the problem? Like, that's the most important thing, because you're hiring based on potential. You're not hiring based on skill or explicit, like, you've done this in the past. You're hiring based on what you see in this person. And the only way to get a sense for how successful they're going to be in this role is to put them in that situation and have them talk through how they're approaching it. And it doesn't even matter if they're like solve the problem. The important thing is that they approach it in the way that you'd like them to approach it. And like I've done take-home coding exercises, I've done in-person pair programming exercises, I've done whiteboarding. Personally, I prefer a pair programming exercise, but some people I think prefer doing homework in advance where they're able to spend time on it on their own and then come in and talk about it, because that's going to be a lot less stressful and anxiety-inducing if you're introverted, presumably. But in my experience, pair programming is the best way to do that live. I don't like take-home homework. I would say like make it as clear and explicit as possible. Like I did one coding exercise where they said, it should take you about 2 hours, and it ended up taking me 10. And that was mostly because I initially went down the wrong path, realized it the next day, and I was like, oh man, they were asking for something completely different, even though what they described as what they wanted was different than their bulleted list of requirements. And so it's like, if you can minimize for any possibility of misinterpreting what the instructions are, the likelihood of success is going to be a lot higher. And also like test it out, like, and get real time, like real legit estimates on time, and don't like just quote, oh, I think that should take about 2 hours, because then somebody's spending a bunch of time outside of work on their limited free time, like nights and weekends, on a coding exercise that terrible, could be a terrible experience. I'll shut it down, but I have more feelings.
We like feelings. What's your perspective?
Yeah, I took the words out of my mouth. We at Software for Good, we use pair programming kind of as the sort of the main way that we understand potential employees. But I'd kind of go one, and for the reasons you articulated, is you want to sit with somebody, you want to understand how they reason about problems, how do they approach them, how do they break them down,
How they take feedback too.
how they take feedback, and also you said it, how they communicate, like what, because you're, like you said, you're investing in a person in your company, you're investing in this person who will be part of the community. You're not hiring them to solve your problems right now. That's not exactly what you're looking for with a junior developer. And so I think it should be a different type of an interview process. But also at Software for Good, we just started an intern program where we could literally pair program with people for like 12 months or 12 weeks, sorry. And then, yeah, it was a long intern. And then at the end of that, we can have, then we can be like, oh, it was a great time, right? And we can know people really well at the end of 12 weeks. So we're a small company, and so we haven't had to hire a lot of people recently. We're only about 15 people. But it gives you a really great insight into people's work patterns and how they approach problems. So I highly recommend both of those.
I do want to hear more about that though, because one thing that I hear from a bunch of folks from companies that are like, we don't hire junior devs.
Oh, I hate hearing that.
And for some companies, it's almost like a mental block where it's just like, we're not a Target or a Best Buy. We don't have hundreds of employees. We don't have the resources. You just said you are a 15-person shop though. So for someone who, and we'll get into more of the like, we don't hire junior devs thing in general, but for someone who maybe is interested in starting it, but like would have no idea where to start, especially if they have a small shop, how did you even start that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, we're Software for Good. And so one of the things that we're interested in is making a better community. It's kind of part of our social mission. And to that end, hiring junior devs, bringing folks in from wide backgrounds, I think is important. Frankly, I maybe it isn't for everybody. Maybe some companies don't have a good fit, don't have a good culture to support and mentor and bring people in. Fine, that's for them. I don't think that's the right approach. I don't think that's useful or valuable to the community, but let them do their thing. We got started because we were thinking that we could bring together. Kept hearing the same problem. A nonprofit or a social enterprise would come to us with, very limited budget, with a really interesting problem they want to solve in the community. But we were either fully booked up or they couldn't pay a market rate for full-on engineer. And so we were like, how do we still help them solve their problem and create some good in the community? And so we put together this internship program where we sort of brought them all together. so hopefully, kind of killing two birds on that. And we found that, it's been really great. It's given people an opportunity to get exposure in, a working environment, to learn some technical skills and, some interesting tech stacks. And then we've launched some pretty interesting, cool technology and tools. So that's kind of how we got started. We since scaled back. We were doing 3 cohorts a year, which got to be a little bit much, to 1 bigger cohort per year. And when we started, we thought it was really important to have at least a part-time internship coordinator whose job was, all the administrative around it, as well as, the mentor to go to facilitate connections with the broader Software for Good team. We think that having somebody in that role and tasked at that role is important. So for an organization that wants to look, I like to think of having our staff as sort of a spectrum of developer skills. Mm-hmm. Some junior, some very senior, some people in the middle. And that gives us sort of an opportunity to solve problems the best. Other people think, oh, I'm just only going to hire super senior devs and whatever. So I like to keep a balanced approach to our staff makeup. Mm-hmm. And so as the junior folks on our team continue to get to mid-level, we'll continue to hire other junior folks to put them in. And at some point, this is an on-ramp to those folks into the community, mm-hmm. which is okay. If somebody leaves Software for Good and works for another company, awesome, mm-hmm. we're winning. Like, I don't see that as a negative. Like, it hurts. Like, but at the same time, like, that's winning. So, good job, Software for Good and tech community.
And you bring up one thing where it is a benefit to having juniors and seniors and mid-levels at your company is just that mix of different experiences and being able to articulate, if you're a senior, being able to mentor, et cetera, et cetera. I'd like to hear from everyone, though, of just from those employers or folks in the community that just are like, we don't hire junior devs, like, why should they care?
I want to kind of like, Casey touched on something that he didn't explicitly say, but the reason why Software for Good is a 15-person like consulting shop is able to accommodate and hire junior devs is because they've made it a priority. Mm-hmm. And I feel like when you hear people say, "Oh, we're hiring," my first question is, "Oh, are you open to hiring junior?" And they say, "Oh no, we need somebody who can hit the ground running. Mm-hmm. Like, we need somebody who can start yesterday," like stuff like that. And I feel like that speaks to you haven't made hiring junior a priority, mm-hmm. and you're trying to like solve immediate pain. And part of that is like, if you can plan ahead, you can make it a priority and solve that pain before it hits. And this is like tangential, but I think when people are saying we need to hire somebody when we don't hire junior, it's because they're behind. Mm-hmm. And that's, I completely understand being in that situation because that's how I feel right now with my own business. Yeah. But it also means with some thought and attention and energy going into it and being explicit about, all right, we need to make this a priority, mm-hmm. like Software for Good did. Like, you can be very successful by doing that.
Yeah, just continue that. Like, I think of it as an investment, both into Software for Good as well as into the community in general. Yeah. And so if you're in operational, tactical, I gotta fight fires and do all the things and not thinking about making an investment for the medium and long term, you're just in a different mindset, different frame. And so that's how I approach it and how I think about it.
Yeah, I definitely think people don't think about the long-term investment, because when I apply for jobs, they would say, well, you need like 1 to 2 years of experience. And I was like, that's great, but how am I going to get that experience? Mm-hmm. You won't hire me, you know? Mm-hmm. Like, it just doesn't make any sense. They just expect me to have 3 years of experience automatically on my resume.
So dumb. And I feel like what you're speaking to is there's a gap. There's like, and I feel like when I was starting out, there was a gap between folks who were like maybe entry level, like ready to go work full time as a junior developer, and companies saying, oh yeah, we need somebody with a couple years experience. Like, where do you think those people come from? And I feel like that gap, unfortunately, I think that gap has widened over the last couple of years. You've got a lot of great boot camps where people are making career transitions from other industries into development, which is awesome and fantastic. But the problem is that they're all coming up and they're all applying and vying for the same jobs, which means they're all competing with each other, and there aren't enough jobs to go around because companies aren't all prioritizing hiring junior and promoting from within. And I've seen a handful of places try to address this problem. And it's almost like an internship or like an apprenticeship program or a finishing school is sort of what you need to get between 0 years of experience and like, here, I'm ready, hire me now, right? And it's like, you kind of have to like, coming up, you have to find a company that'll take a chance on you, which puts a huge amount of onus on you, a junior dev, when it's already really hard. Like, it doesn't need to be harder. I don't know.
And oftentimes when a company is taking a chance on you, it's because, you know, you have the luxury of a personal network. Like when you were saying, going through that process, and I know you also went through Invisible Network, but a lot of times those companies, and I used to work for a boot camp, and so we would see like some companies who had a blanket like 4-year CS degree. We don't do boot camp. Oh, but I got to know this person, and now we can bend the rules, you know? and so it is interesting, and leveraging the, I think where I struggle with is, you know, I sit on a few different councils, Matt, you're on a couple of them, where we analyze some greater trends that are happening around attraction and retention of tech talent to the region. And, you know, it's no surprise and no shocker that we are, you know, in a really tough time when it comes to employers finding tech talent. I'm probably preaching to the choir for you, but there's these two things happening at the same time, right? And I agree, I don't feel like it's changed a whole lot. There is this massive issue with the tech talent shortage that employers are facing. And at the same time, we have a ton of junior devs coming out of all different types of learning institutions or entering the field in a variety of different ways that cannot find a job, or that first job, I should say. And
or
these
having trouble,
you know, and I find that really interesting. We're not unique in that. A lot of other metro areas our size are grappling with that too. But I do feel like there are some other metros that are a little bit further along when it comes to apprenticeship model programs, or like what you were talking about, like a finishing school, kind of something to help cushion that gap. I'm curious, both from your perspective of having gone through the application process, but also, you know, you do a lot of hiring for this internship program. How long does it typically take to hire or to get placed for a junior dev, maybe as compared to a mid-level or senior?
I guess it depends on the company.
Yeah.
I think, I was an intern at Casey's company, Something for Good. So I think that application came out on Twitter, and I immediately was on it, and I applied, and it took like a month maybe. And then after that, I got it.
Didn't take a month to fill out. It took a month.
No. I forgot what the application was like because you've changed it. Yeah. So it's like, were there questions?
It's really selective. Very hard to get through that
Takes
application.
you 10 hours.
It's not like a month. It's quite a while.
It's a long time. It's a very long challenge, but yeah.
I think we, we try to be very thoughtful in that application process. It's kind of a survey almost. Tell us about you, tell us about some of your experiences, what you've been through, tell us what you're interested in. Understanding that, this isn't something to like disqualify people that don't have any experience. It's more just to get to know them. And then the next, after probably a 15, 30-minute phone call with folks, usually like 30 or 40 of them, then it goes to another round of bringing people in to do some pair programming and further conversations. And then that whittles down to 3 to 5 or whatever for the actual cohort for the internship program.
How many people, like, what does that funnel look like? Like applicants to people you actually talk to people that you bring in, to people you hire?
Who reads the applications? That's a lot.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, that's what I was saying about having a coordinator and somebody in that position is like, again, I'm not going to lie, or I'm not going to like hide the fact that there is an investment you need to make as a company. You need to have a person in this role. They need to dedicate the time, the resources. Your senior engineers need to dedicate the time and resources to be available, so that you don't just hire a junior dev, or you don't just create an internship program and then all of a sudden they're building a bunch of amazing things. You're making billions of dollars. Like, that's not how it works.
That sounds nice.
I know. I'm going to start that someday. It's going to be amazing. So I think top of the funnel, 50, 60-ish. I don't actually have the real numbers, but it's somewhere around that, and whittle it down. Maybe half or 3/4 of that, and then for phone calls, maybe 30 to 50, somewhere in there. But then it's pair programming with like maybe 10 or so, kind of depends. And 3 to 5.
I know this isn't the question that you asked, but like what you're speaking to is like, it's a very time-consuming process. It's very time-consuming. Like when I went through the process of establishing our process at my last employer, they opened up, like I went through 3 rounds of hiring junior devs, and each time I think they hired 2. And so there were 2 openings, and their process was like, put up an associate level opening posting, and they got flooded with candidates. Everybody's applying, right? When you make it clear, here's a junior level role, call it with an associate title, you're not expected to have any experience. Like there are so many people who are looking for roles like that you have, like, your initial problem is managing the overwhelm. And like our recruiters were like, I've been on 14 phone calls a day all week, and I've only talked to 80 people. It's like they're overwhelmed. And then, so it's like there's definitely like steps in the process where it's like you have your initial applicants, and then from there it's phone calls, and from there it's another screening thing. And then they get to like hiring managers, and then they get to actually coming in and talking to the team. And that's where it's like you got your 4-hour in-person coding exercise or something, where it's like it's a lot for everybody involved, and it's also like from a software team's perspective, it's very disruptive to your normal sprint cadence. And so it's like you really have to make this a priority, and you have to be realistic about what the expectations are and how much time and energy is going to go into it. But the benefit, to Casey's point, is that you're helping the community as a whole, right? We all do better when we all do better. And where do you think mid-level developers and senior developers come from? They were junior developers once, and if you expect to only hire junior, like it's almost like there's like a giving and a taking. It's like your net, if you're only hiring senior, your net is negative, and you want to try to give back to the community. And so if nothing else, make that a priority is helping folks. But it's going to be a lot of work.
And that's my very hippie view of it as well. I love it. But I think as a company, like as a capitalist company that just wants to make a bunch of money, like they got talent shortages internally. Like they have to grow their own staff, right? And so they got to start making those strategic investments internally. And so you can't just let software for good train all of the staff, right? Like you got to start thinking about it. And I think targeting some of these other companies are making some of these moves, which is important. So don't want to discount that as well. So
you're good at it.
Yeah.
But you can only train up so many.
Right. It's not nearly the capacity we want it to be.
One thing I want to remind folks of is there is a chat icon at the bottom. So really, we want to hear from you. We want to hear what questions that you have or comments or anything. Are you experiencing any of this? Are you an employer that's kind of starting to think about building up an internship program or an apprenticeship model program? Any questions for Casey? Are you a junior dev who is going through the application process right now, and you have a question for Chelsey, who just went through it? All of these different, Matt kind of from his perspective, interfacing with so many different types of companies that are hiring right now. Leverage this time, throw whatever questions that you have in the chat. One thing that I do want to talk about, and you touched on, is we've talked a lot about hiring and the hiring process and the interviewing process, but we've not talked about the onboarding and the retention of junior developers. So you started talking about how, and actually you were mentioning this.
You should start by asking Chelsey what hers is, because she's the one who's gone through this most recently.
Right. But I want to circle back a little bit to what you were saying around, you can't just like hey, we hired someone, all right, go get them, kind of thing.
Here's your backlog. Go build it.
Exactly. So when you talk about your experience that, you just went through this, you're actually about 7 months in?
Mm-hmm.
7 months? Okay.
Nice.
Congrats.
Thanks.
Woo.
It feels very weird to say.
Yeah.
Do you feel? I feel like there's a lot like from my personal experience. Like, this is a tangent. Sorry.
No, go for it.
But like getting that first job as a junior dev is like, holy crap, big milestone. This is so exciting.
Big.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, I can rest now because it was so hard to get to this point, and you can't.
No, you can't rest.
It continues to be hard, but in a different way. And I feel like for me, the big milestone was like about a year into working full time as a developer. I kind of shed that feeling of imposter syndrome, and I felt like I could do the work. And it took me about a year to get to that point where I'm like, I feel confident and capable in my ability to actually do software engineering work, which is what I set out to do like 2 years ago. So 7 months in, how do you feel?
It's different. Like I was programming on the side by myself for so long, and now I have a team, and that's a different transition. Like, I hate to say it, but working with people, I do like people, but I'm just saying, it's a hard transition because they all come from different backgrounds, and so you have to get to know them, and it's a lot of emotional labor.
And how big is your team?
It's 3, actually 4.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
4.
I feel like that's a good size team. Like maybe one more person would be good, but like as soon as you get to like 8, it's too much.
Yeah,
like,
it's a lot.
Too many people, too many personalities to manage.
Slowly we kind of implemented each person like one-on-one, which I'm also grateful for because I came in to stand up and there was like 3 new people. I would have lost it. Like what? What's your experience? How'd you get here?
I wouldn't want to see you angry.
So what was your onboarding process like then?
It's actually different. It's way different because the city of St. Paul recently started a full stack team. There wasn't one at all before Sharon Kennedy Vickers started her role. So I'm trying to think, what was the application process? So they put an application out or like a posting, and it said junior in the title, and they had thousands of applications. Because I applied for this. I did the 100 Days of Code challenge, and I applied for it. I started that challenge in November. I applied for it like the first week of that challenge, and I didn't hear back until February. Like, that's how long it was. Just to hear back, it was so long.
Do you feel like it being government made for it not to be slower?
I thought so, but then I called HR and I was like, what's up with this application? And they were like, listen, we have thousands of applications, so you're just gonna have to be patient with us. I was like, sorry, I just want this job.
And congrats.
So it's new, like we're building from the ground up, which I think is exciting, but it also has its challenges because in the previous companies I've worked for and been around, they've already had an onboarding process. Like the company has been there and they've like gone through these things. And for us, we're just creating that. So
That's tricky.
yeah.
I feel like that'd be good, but also bad because it's like when you come into a new team, there's existing dynamics you have to figure out, and there's existing processes, and like you have to learn everything. And there's already stuff existing. It's almost like moving in with your significant other, and they already lived there before. And then what you're talking about is like, it's like you're moving into you and your significant other are moving into a new place together. It's a really terrible analogy. But like, it's like you get to like have a part in sort of establishing some of the things because they haven't yet figured everything out yet.
Yeah.
It's like you get to help shape the team dynamics.
Yeah, definitely like a major thing for me has been planning. I've learned a lot for that because before I'd be like, I just wanted to do an app and I would do it. But now everyone's like, no, you gotta do user stories and like web flows and all this. And I was like, okay, sorry. And there has to be a backlog and like, it's like steps, which is new, but it's actually turned out to like help me out so much. So much. Like now, even if I start a project, I'm like, maybe I should plan this out first. And I never used to think about that.
It's funny because it's like, at first you're like, oh man, all this processing, it's such a headache. And then you realize, then you see the value in it. Once you've gone through it, you're like, oh, okay, this makes sense now.
Yeah, it made a lot of sense.
I know that software for good, like user stories is a huge part of what you're doing.
Yeah, totally.
So with onboarding, I feel like that's like one of the many things that you have to that you figure out as you're just starting. And I remember for me starting out, like figuring out how to work with the team, figuring out the team dynamics, getting to know the personalities on the team, getting to know the business, getting to know the products. getting to know the code base, getting it, like, there are a handful of milestones that's like, literally just like, get your new computer set up.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, it's like, all right, now like, get the repo set up. And like that, like those two things, it's like,
It's
those
so
can
funny
be so
because
much
it's
harder
true.
than they really are. Than they,
Yeah.
than they sound, right? Conceptually it's simple, but it's way harder. It's way more technical than you think. I feel like you have a horror story there somewhere.
Yeah, we recently got MacBooks at our job, and I don't remember because I've always had all of my MacBooks before have been used, and so I've gotten them from my friends, and so they've already set it up for me. So this is like the first time I set it up myself. It was so painful. It was so painful, and I remember just like being like, Casey, is there anything else? And he's like, nope, there's a couple more steps. Like, keep going. And it's like, this happens to everybody. And he's like, all happy about it, and I'm like, no. Why is it like this? Like, why is Ruby not working? Like,
And those are the sort of things where like somebody who's more experienced and gone through this a number of times before, they're like, oh yeah, I've done that before. So this is a problem I've solved. So it's not hard. But then when it's the first time you go through it, it's like, it's really hard.
yeah.
Yeah. I remember when I started at my first junior dev job, like setting up my computer, like I'd worked with like new Macs before, so it wasn't that hard, but it was still like, what stuff do I need? I don't know what stuff I need yet because I don't know what I'm working in.
Yeah.
And so it was like, all right, setting up this like gigantic, massive mono repo with like some really old version of Ruby, and like there's some other weird stuff in there, and there's Oracle. Like it was like every step of the way you'd take 2 steps forward and then 1 step back. And it was like that until you finally got to the point where it's like, oh my gosh, the app is running locally now.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's just like one of the first of many sequences of like very, like they don't sound big, but they actually are big when you're first starting out.
Yeah. This is really interesting because I try not to be dismissive about like these problems that we're facing, but I want it to be more of like, I'm instilling confidence that developers face problems and complications and things every single minute of their day. Like nothing ever goes the way you want it to.
Yep.
You're
And when it does, you're skeptical.
then you're like, how did that work? Oh, I didn't actually test the thing I thought it was. Like, oh, okay, it's actually not working. Okay.
I would rather it not work the first time because then I know like, all right, that drives me
Now I
what I
can
expect.
yeah, right. So I don't want to be dismissive of the problems, but it's like, being, senior engineer, being around the block a little bit, like, yeah, that's just what you do. Like, you're solving problems all the time, and then they show up in all different fashions, like in code, in infrastructure, in your tools, in people, and how you communicate. Like it's all problem solving all the time. So that's why, like, back to the early parts, like how do you solve problems? Like how do you approach things? How do you break them down? Being able to convey that to a hiring manager or somebody is really, really important.
Yeah.
And not to get hopefully not to get frustrated and to find a way to, like, I don't know exactly how to do this. I don't know how to like teach this, but to find space to like walk away, to say, I'm not getting it, and it's been an hour and a half, or it's been a day and a half, like whatever, like I just need to take a break, or I need to like call somebody in or whatever, like give yourself like that out to say, it's okay. Like I can't figure this out. We were working on getting Postgres installed the other day. It was like, I haven't installed Postgres on my machine for like, I don't know, 5 years or something like. And so we're like going through all this. And we're installing it. I'm like, oh yeah, I don't remember exactly how to set this up. And I was like, oh yeah, so we're gonna install. But yeah, I don't even know how to do the user management anymore. Like I never. And I'm just like, hopefully we can get through some of the imposter syndrome, showing somebody who's been around the block, doesn't have a clue how to do the thing anymore. Like, let's Google. Stack Overflow is your friend. Okay, cool, awesome. So
I feel like there's a lot of things there, but what you reminded me about is coming in as a junior dev. You look at the people who are like very experienced, and you're like, wow, I hope I'm like that someday. And it's like they just get it because they've solved these problems enough times. And they're like, oh yeah, it's just a problem to solve. Like it's not the end of the world. And I feel like it takes a long time to get to the point where you realize, oh, they don't know anything about this new technology either, but they're confident in their ability to figure it out. And when you're first starting out and you haven't gone through that cycle enough times, it can be really scary and daunting. You're like, oh, there's a new technology I know nothing about. This is like, the sky is falling, like the world's gonna end, but that's not the case. I like to think of it as like the distinction between a junior dev and a senior dev in my head is like the trick, the secret, the dirty secret about being a software engineer is you're really just learning how to learn. And on a regular basis, you have to figure out, okay, there's something new I need to understand. I need to understand enough so that I can implement it the way I need to implement it. And then I'm going to move on to the next thing. And then I'm going to iterate and go through that same cycle with something completely different. And so in my mind, the distinction between a senior dev and a junior dev is the cycle time is shorter because you've done it a lot of times. And that when you're first starting out, the cycle time is longer because you're figuring out, like you're teaching yourself how to solve problems, you're teaching yourself how to learn. And you're getting more comfortable with the idea of not knowing anything about something.
Yeah. And I think that's a big piece of it is being comfortable with not knowing and be able to compartmentalize the unknown as a variable. Like, I don't know anything about that little section over there or whatever. Like, that's okay. I'm not going to try to learn that right now. I'm over here and I'm just going to solve this thing. And I don't have to have sort of the grandiose view of all of the things and all of the way they work together. Like, that's maybe okay, because that's a lot.
So, when I was interviewing, one of the things I was told, a piece of advice was always to say, I don't know, which I didn't realize at the time how powerful it was. And when I worked at Software for Good, I had a problem, and I was working with Kevin, and Kevin's like an OG programmer, right? Yeah. And we were looking at this problem. He was like, you know what? I don't know. And I was like, you don't know? It's like mind blown. I was like, oh my God, I can say that too. And I was like, great, because I don't know either. So we were like, let's Google. So it was,
that's so liberating, though, especially when you're going through the throes of imposter syndrome and you're afraid to say that you don't know because you're like, everyone's going to find out I'm a fraud. You know, it's just like, no. And then seeing someone else who's more senior, like that just, I mean, and that it's across disciplines. Like, I don't code for my job, but it comes in waves. And then, there's some days that you just feel like a rock star, and there's some days where you're just like, ugh.
Yeah. Running a business is like that too.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. It's such a vulnerable place. You know.
You reminded me there was a time at my old job where like the most senior, most experienced principal engineer, everybody looks up to and respects. Like, he knows everything about everything. Like, he's been working there for ages. Like, the time it would take for him to do something would be like a quarter of the time it would take anybody else to do. And he brings down prod like one day. And the VP of engineering was like, you need to go in Slack and just let people know, like, hey, I brought down prod today. I'm not proud of it, but it's a thing that happens. And so, like, I just want everybody to know that, like, it's okay. Yeah. And that I'm going to be fine. I'm not going to get fired. Yeah. And I feel like that's the sort of thing where, like, you look at these, like, very experienced people and you just think they're, like, gods. Yeah. And they're just regular people who make mistakes and don't know things either. Like, they're regular people too, even though it might not feel that way when you're first starting out.
I think it's especially important thinking, and when I was working with folks, this is maybe unique to the bootcamp experience, maybe not. A lot of our students would already have different careers that they're trying to pivot from, right? And so, yes, you may be the newest person in the room when it comes to blank technology, but you come with like such an interesting background. Do you want to share what you were doing beforehand? And I don't know if this has ever interplayed into your current role, because like, I think that, well, I'll let you.
Okay. So I worked as a counselor for Minneapolis public schools, and I worked with high school students. It's way different than working with computers.
Which one's more predictable?
Also, it's the same.
Yeah, it's pretty much the same. Just one has like less human interaction than before. So it was just interesting because I started working in the school when coding is becoming class. Yeah. It's becoming part of the curriculum. And so there were all of these resources that I could use, which is how I got started, because I was playing with those resources. And I was like, what? I should have had this when I was in high school. Because if I did, I don't know where it would be, y'all, but it wouldn't be, it would be like somewhere else. I don't know, Silicon Valley. So I was like, what? This is great. And the kids were learning and I was learning. And that's one of the good things about working in school is that it's an environment where you can learn and you do feel safe learning. But now it's very different, again, with like the less human interaction. Also, it's a lot more quiet, and I found that I really like the sound of kids. So I get out in the office and it's like, very, very, very silent. And I remember the first week I was there, like I heard somebody cough. And I was like, what is that coming from? Because it was so quiet. So it's different. I like both, but it's different.
But has your experience as a counselor applied in ways you didn't expect?
Yeah, definitely. Being patient is one. Asking questions is one. trying to figure out what's wrong with people. Like one of my team members came in yesterday and he was hangry, but I didn't know that, so I had to figure it out. So it's like, what's going on today? Like, did you eat? And he's like, no. And I'm like, okay, that's what it is. Yep. So you're hangry, okay? You know?
And you're taking it out on everyone else.
Yeah. Okay, we figured it out. So how are we gonna solve it? He's like, I guess I can go eat. I'm like, okay, go eat. Go.
Look at you, probably solved.
We do have about 10 minutes left. We have a few different questions that we're going to get to on here. But again, last chance if you want to throw anything in the chat, if you have any questions for either of our amazing guests. Oh, this is interesting. We didn't talk about this with hiring. How much should you pay junior developers?
I want to hear this.
Okay, so I have a lot of feelings about this. As a whole, I have a lot of feelings. But so we did a survey with Minneapolis Junior Devs. We did a survey, and this was like a couple years ago when we realized that me and one of the other founders of Minneapolis Junior Devs, we were basically at the same point in our careers, and one of us was making 20 grand more than the other, which is like, whoa, hey, that's a surprise. Mm-hmm. And so we did a survey, and we looked at demographics and expectations around junior dev salaries. And what we saw was like pretty eye-opening. And it was kind of, I mean, if you were going to guess, like if I were going to ask you like to guess what you think the results were, like it would probably be pretty in line with what you would guess, which is like white men had expectations way higher than everybody else. And like, so that we asked for 3 different levels about like, what's the minimum you would accept? What would your ideal number be, and what would your dream number be? And so we kind of had like a 3 points on a dot or on a line. And the results were crazy because just for people saying like, what would you expect to make? White men were way up here and everybody else was down here. And it was like looking at like Asian or Latinx or Black, like depending on ethnicities and genders, it was dramatically different. And so we did some research a couple years ago with the Invisible Network. I'm seeing a lot of like real hard salary data, and going through interviews and hiring junior devs in my last company, I've seen real experiences there too. And my recommendations for like an entry-level junior developer, I feel like 75K is a comfortable starting point. It's a good starting salary. And I say that because like, if a normal salary curve in your career is like this, a development salary curve is like this, where you could go from making like, you could basically double your starting salary between 0 and 3 years of experience. Like that's how dramatic it is. And like, I've heard everywhere from as low as about 55K all the way up to like 80K as entry-level starting salary for a developer. And like myself included, I was on the high end of that spectrum, and I had, like, for one, I should say I'm a good negotiator. I'm a white male, so I'm very privileged. And I had a lot of other relevant related experience working in software as a data analyst, as a software engineer, or not as a software engineer, as a product manager, and also as a founder. And so I used that and 3 offers at once to negotiate for a higher starting salary. But I've heard of other like very high achieving junior devs with no experience getting offers of 80K also. But 55K to 80K is a huge range. And I feel like what I've heard mostly is around 65 or 60 is where people start, which I think is too low. I heard, and this is at a former employer, they were making 2 offers, one to a man, one to a woman, and they wanted them both to not at the same place, and they offered the woman more because they expected the man to negotiate, and the man negotiated and the woman did not, and they ended up at the same spot. But like the fact that that was the thing that happened is really messed up, right? Sorry.
No.
And so I would say for an entry-level developer, I think 70-75 is a very good starting spot here in the Twin Cities. I would say the range could be anywhere from 60 to 80, but 70-75 feels like pay them well, and in a year they're going to be punching way above that pay grade. And if you don't have systems in place to give pay bumps like every 6 months to junior devs, in like 2 years they're going to leave and they're going to make like 20-30 grand more. And so it's crazy how dramatically salaries increase as you get more and more experience. And I'll tell you, I started my first junior dev salary was $80K, and I started high. And my second one, coming in with 3 years of experience, I negotiated and I was up to 110. And I don't expect other people to have that same experience. And I should say I'm a good, again, very privileged, good negotiator, big network. Like I've got a recipe for the job search, like hiring is kind of my thing. But that was my experience, and it varies dramatically from person to person. But if you want to put your junior devs in positions to lead, I'd say 70-75 is a good place to start. And also do all the other stuff that we're recommending.
Anything else you want to chime in?
I mean, it's pretty personal, so it's one of those things that,
I just really appreciate how much knowing what your salary is going to be has just become more of a regular thing. Because before you look at job postings and there wouldn't be any like indication, and now they actually include it in the job postings. And then some recruiters are very open about it, or like people work with the company, and so a lot of my friends like discuss their own salaries before, which I realized that we weren't doing. So it's pretty eye-opening. Like and I do remember that survey, and I very much took that survey. And the data, I was like, oh, wow.
We'll share a link to that. Can we share a link to
totally.
that? After this, we'll send it via email to all of you. But please negotiate, women. Please negotiate, whether it is your salary or your benefits or whatnot.
But also, if you're hiring, like pay attention to
Yes.
there is a gender pay gap, and you're perpetuating it if you're not starting people at the same level.
Yep. But I mean, I think just that insight of employers expect that. It's an expected part of a process that there is some sort of conversation, and that there's some sort of given back and forth kind of thing. Worst case scenario is that they'll say no. They're not going to rescind your, whatever. But
I feel like I've heard people worried about offers getting rescinded, and I've never, maybe it's happened once. I've never really heard of people rescinding offers. Like if they made you an offer, they want you.
Right? The worst case that they'll say no to that number or whatever. They won't
just be like, no, this
rescind your offer.
is our top line.
Yeah, exactly.
And I agree on the hiring front, you've already invested so much in that process to find that person, to even to literally open up and make a formal offer. Like that takes so much time. And so if somebody incrementally asks for another 2 to 5 or whatever, more, you're not going to like say no to that. There's just no way. So, maybe there's a way. I don't know. Like it just seemed really far-fetched that you would balk at that. So
we do have a question that came through from Jay. And Jay said, I'm wondering, as an aspiring junior developer, if there are recommended resources on where to apply.
I would first say, take out the title aspiring, because if you code already, then you are a junior developer. You're on the track. And I guess for applying, the Invisible Network is one. Indeed was a really good one for me. Your personal network, and I would say LinkedIn, but that varies. And it really varies. Like sometimes people get like crazy job posting where it's like 5 years experience. And sometimes you actually find like a junior dev posting. So you just gotta be open.
I'm biased, but you should check out Minneapolis Junior Devs, which is like, we started this as a community for junior devs to help each other. And we have events once a month. They usually happen at Prime Digital Academy. We're not affiliated with Prime, the events just happen there. And our next event is coming up on January 14th. The website, if you search for Minneapolis Junior Devs, you should be able to find it. The URL is mplsjrdevs.com. Our speaker for January, I think we know who the speaker is, but we don't know the topic exactly, and it's going to be somebody from Target, so should be a good presentation. But beyond that, come to our events and meet other people, other like-minded people. We have a Slack channel too. So that's my shill for junior devs. But join the community, right?
Jay says you guys rock.
No, you rock.
You rock, Jay. All right, we're gonna close. This has been an amazing conversation. I really want to thank my guests, who are also my friends, for being here. Anything else that y'all want to plug before we go?
thanks for having us.
I would
Yeah,
plug
thanks.
Minnestar.
Yeah, Minnestar's great.
Amazing organization. They're in there's a donation match going on right now that I know about.
Is.
I gotta donate.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
get your end donations and it'll be matched. So
Yep.
I'll plug that from there.
Yeah. Casey's our board chair.
No conflict.
And and both Chelsey and Matt have been really engaged in our community for a long time. And if you've never been to our events, you should definitely come. They're free, they're inclusive, they're open to anyone who has a passion or interest in technology.
That's another place where you can also find about jobs.
Yes.
At events, at tech events. So
Mhm.
networking.
Mm-hmm. And put it on your calendar for April 25th because that's Minneapolis. And if you've never been, that is a massive, what is Paul called?
Conference.
Yes, yeah. So it's the largest and longest running unconference for tech. And you can learn about finding a job. You can get connected with the community. Minneapolis Junior Devs started there.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
And I should say, Minibar is my favorite day of the year. And I tell people that and they're like, wait, do you mean like your favorite like conference of the year? And I'm like, no, it's my favorite day of the year. Like Minibar is fun. It's
super fun.
Everything is attendee led. And like I already know what my sessions are gonna be that I'm gonna lead this year, and they're not gonna be like for work or anything. One of them's gonna be your domain has expired. Stories about lapsed domains.
Oh,
That sounds fun.
It's gonna be good. Yeah.
That's not fun.
I think I had another one too. I already forgot it all. But Minibar is amazing. Mini Demo is amazing. Like Minnestar as a whole puts on incredible events. You should check them all out. And thank you, Maria, again for having us.
thank you. All right, we will send you a link to some of the stuff we talked about afterwards. Otherwise, have a wonderful day. Thanks for joining us. Bye.